name is Julia Lambeth. I'm an educator at WSET School London, and in this video we're going to be looking at 5 different options for making sparkling wines. The first option we're going to look at is whether to use 1 or 2 fermentations. When we're thinking about making sparkling wines, some wines are made using 1 fermentation, and the carbon dioxide produced during that fermentation is then trapped and then gets dissolved into the wine to make a sparkling wine. This is what's used for Asti method and ancestral method. However, for the majority of sparkling wines, they are made using 2 fermentations. So initially a wine will be made, and then a second fermentation occurs where the producer will add some more yeast and sugar to the wine, and that creates a second fermentation. And it's the carbon dioxide from that fermentation that's then trapped and dissolves into the wine. This is what's going to be used for traditional method, transfer method, tank method. All of these wines will use 2 fermentations. Another option we can consider is the blending of the base wine. And this is going to be a very important stage of the process, and there are in fact several things that we can blend together in order to make the base wine. This could include different grape varieties. There are many grape varieties that are used to make sparkling wines. Some regions have legal limits over what grape varieties are possible to use, such as in Champagne or in Cava, and other regions have a bit more flexibility. The exact choice of each grape variety and how much of each grape variety goes into the blend will determine the different flavour characteristics or structural characteristics of the wines, such as the acidity and body. Different wines might have different labelling terms to reflect the grape varieties that are used. For example, a wine that says Blanc de Blanc will tell you only white grapes were used, whereas a wine that says Blanc de Noir will tell you that black grapes are used instead. Another option is to blend wine of different vintages. Many sparkling wines are non-vintage in that they use wines from several different years that are blended together. Traditionally, this would be useful to ensure the consistency of the product. Many regions that we look at for sparkling wines are actually quite cool in terms of their climate. So by having wines from previous years that could be blended into the current year will ensure that we get a consistent product from year to year to year. Other wines are going to be vintage wines in that they are product of just a single harvest. In many places, this is associated with some of the higher quality wines produced in the best years. And in these wines, it will have the year or the vintage traditionally printed on the label. Winemakers can also consider grapes from different regions. In some places, wines can be made from several different regions or sub-regions and blended together. In other places, they might look at a specific vineyard or specific area to select the grapes from. And we can also think about different winemaking options. For sparkling wines, we have many of the same options that we looked at for white wines. We can use oak aging to add more complexity or vanilla, clove, spicy characteristics. We could use some lees contact before our second fermentation to add some toasty or biscuity notes. And we can also think about the use of malolactic conversion. This again can soften the acidity and potentially add some different flavours to the wine, such as creamy, buttery flavours. The next option will be to consider whether we're looking at bottle fermentation or tank method. So when we're talking about bottle method fermentation, this means the first or second fermentation takes place inside a bottle. So for most wines, particularly the traditional method and transfer method, this means that the wine is put into the bottle, the yeast and sugar is added to the bottle, and the second fermentation occurs inside the bottle. As a result of second fermentation, carbon dioxide is produced and that dissolves into the wine, which is going to make it sparkle. After the second fermentation has finished, then the yeast that has been left inside the bottle will die and will start to break down. And this is where we get the process of autolysis, which will add more flavours to the wine. We'll talk in a little bit more detail about autolysis shortly. After this process has finished, then the yeast is typically removed. So in the traditional method, this will be through riddling and disgorgement. In the transfer method, the wines are then filtered. The other option that we mentioned for bottle fermentation is ancestral method, and this is slightly different in that this is only 1 fermentation, and sometimes the producers will actually leave the yeast inside the bottle rather than removing it at the end of the process. By having the yeast in contact with the wine, we can gain some different flavours, such as biscuit and toast, but also gain some more body. Another option is to then have the second fermentation occur inside a tank. These are large specialised vessels which can withstand the higher pressure created by the sparkling wine. In these examples, we typically do not have the yeast left in contact with the wine, so the idea is often to promote the varietal character of the wine instead. For this reason, tank method is often used for aromatic grape varieties, and therefore it's often used in regions like Prosecco or Asti, where we want to taste the varietal character of the wine instead. Another option for the wine is autolysis. So I mentioned autolysis just now in the context of bottle method sparkling wines. However, within autolysis, there are several options there as well. So we can think about the duration of the autolysis. So different wines, different regions have legal minimum requirements in terms of autolysis. And the longer the wine is left in contact with the yeast for, the more of those flavours it's going to get. Here we're talking about flavours like biscuits, brioche, pastry, toast. So the longer we have in terms of autolysis, the more of those flavours we can find. And in fact, autolysis can continue for up to 10 years and still add flavours, although most wines will not be matured for that long. In regions where they have shorter minimum requirements, we would notice more subtle, biscuity, toasty flavours compared to regions where they have lots of autolysis, which can give more rich pastry flavours. As well as flavours, we can see more body created by the autolysis process as well. So again, wines that have longer autolysis will have more in terms of their texture too. When it comes to the end of the process, we can see differences in how the yeast is removed. For traditional method sparkling wines, this has to be done through riddling and disgorgement. For transfer method, this is then done by emptying all the wines into a separate vessel and then removing the yeast by filtration. The final option to consider is the dosage. So after the wine has been through its process and its maturation, its autolysis, then we have the option of adding a dosage which can vary the level of sweetness in the wines. Many sparkling wines have some sugar added because it's been used to balance out the high acidity, which is typical for cool climate regions where many of our sparkling wines are made. So the dosage, also known as the liqueur d'expédition, is a mixture of sugar and wine, which can be added to get to the right level of sweetness. We then have different labelling terms which can reflect the level of sweetness in the wine. Many sparkling wines are labelled brut, which would mean we have between 0 and 12 grams per litre of sugar. A wine labelled demi-sec would have more sugar added to get to between 32 and 50 grams per litre of sugar. In some cases, wines are even drier. A wine labelled brut nature would be between 0 and 3 grams per litre of sugar. And in that example, a dosage would not be added, it would just be any sugar that is remaining after the end of the second fermentation. After the dosage has been added, there will then be a period of time where the wine is aged in bottle after it's corked, and this will allow any of that sugar to integrate into the wine and will also potentially allow some tertiary characteristics to develop, such as dried fruit or nutty aromas. So to finish with, we have an example theory question to look at. The question says, explain why the tank method is suited to making inexpensive wines from aromatic grape varieties, for 6 marks. So the command verb here, explain, means we need to be linking the characteristics of the wine to the method that has been used to produce it. So our answer here says, wines made using the tank method do not undergo autolysis and are unlikely to undergo malolactic conversion or oak aging. This means that the primary characteristics of aromatic grape varieties are preserved, rather than being masked by yeast-derived flavours. The tank method is cheaper than the traditional method as the wines are not required to be aged and the lengthy riddling and disgorgement steps are not needed. It is also less labour intensive, which will also have an impact on the cost. So there we've linked both the aroma and flavour characteristics to the production method, as well as the price and cost in terms of production to the tank method as well. Hope you found that helpful. Thanks for watching.